what hasn't been destroyed by the Russian missiles is being destroyed by Ukrainian private developers.
U.S. official tells CBS News Ukraine's
While we are cheering on Ukraine's
counteroffensive
counteroffensive that seems to now be getting underway, we still must remember that this is still capitalism, and the class interests still continue. In this final segment of our interview with Dennis Pilash, we discuss how that aspect of the war can be raised, the class interests, and specifically what lies behind the question of money laundering and the call to seize the assets of Russian and Ukrainian oligarchs, and a possibility of a campaign around that issue.
Seizures. So we need really to coordinate a campaign that would also go beyond just a situation of the post-Soviet space, because the same applies to almost any region in the world, like in the global periphery and semi-periphery. Oligarchic capitalists, their ruling classes, they just storage their the money and the wealth they have robbed their country of in tax havens and in the West. So we need to address this issue. And really, if a campaign, if we have a full-scale campaign, it would be quite important.
You know, the United States is the largest haven for offshoring money and for money laundering. The largest, I mean, they talk about the Cayman Islands and Switzerland and so on. The United States dwarfs all of them, you know, and Trump himself, that's how he made his millions, was laundering money for the Russian oligarchs. And all the attacks on Trump in the media here, they never mention that. You know, because the entire real estate industry is just rampant with money laundering, mainly for the drug cartels. So what do you say about having a joint campaign around that?
Because it's a part of this global inequality when you have people with with this luxury that is in a way ridiculous, and it's in your face, yes, and you have billions of people who have no access to some very basic utilities, and like inside very unequal societies, which both majority of Eastern European ones and the US one we share this feature of the societies, that we have very rich people on the top and everyone else is struggling. So because the people were driven by this resentment against oligarchs, they were driven with complete rejection of the model of this peripheral oligarchy capitalism. But these demands, they were never articulated by the mainstream political actors in Ukraine. So in words, they all are against oligarchs. So Zelensky himself, who once was dependent on Kolomoisky and then tried to distance himself from this oligarch. So he now claims that he's waging some kind of campaign against the oligarchs. But in a way, yes, he does, but it's on the behalf of a bit lesser capitalists. Yes, so they try to use the situation, yes, to take down these bigger fishes, the major sharks in Ukrainian oligarchic world, and then make it more pluralistic with more players and possibly international capital also pouring in a bigger scale. But ultimately, yes, it's just reshuffling inside the same system. It's something that if you explain it in a very simple terms, so yes, it's very understandable for the people on both sides of the Atlantic.
I raised the issue of money laundering and the utter corruption of the entire capitalist system, and how that's really driving millions of people.
Everyone understands that Ukrainian Russian and other post-Soviet oligarchs, they came to power via the process of primitive accumulation of capital that was undistinguishable from just some criminal activity in the 90s. So these are people who were very tied with the underworld, and these are people who actually stole state property for nothing. Yes, they paid minimal prices in the process of privatization. That was in a way something like again looting of the entire country. So here they obtained their wealth. Some of them, like Pinchuk, Pinchuk was son of son-in-law of President Kuchma, and President Kuchma was the primary architect of our oligarchy capitalist system. So yes, these were people that were personally some manifestation of this conjuncture of political and economical power, but also of the criminal dealings. And lots of these people, they are still go with the same traits and the same way of doing business, like in 90s. It's very criminal ones. They can intimidate, for instance, trade union activists with some hired up thugs. Yeah, these are people with no moral compass. So this actually pretty much helped them in the 90s. And in the private, this private estate, the developers in Ukrainian cities, they are the actual masters of Kiev and other cities. So people like Mayor Klitschko, they are just some kind of servants for this real real masters. And what developers do to Ukrainian cities, it's something terrible. So it's like lots of people would agree that actually even now in the times of full-scale war, these people and their capital is doing what hasn't been destroyed by the Russian missiles is being destroyed by Ukrainian private developers who actually destroy some public and green spaces throughout the cities, who destroy some historical buildings in order to build more, I don't know, shopping malls and something where they can not so much enrich themselves as just, again, do money laundering. Yes?
I asked about launching a campaign to seize the real estate and other assets that Russian and Ukrainian oligarchs have hidden in the United States and elsewhere, and linking that with the question of money laundering.
And I think that this that you mentioned about the tax haven aspect and the money laundering aspect and the general corruption aspect, these are very essential pillars of this system that they try to reproduce also in the post-war reconstruction. So we need to, by presenting our vision of socially, ecologically, generally just reconstruction of Ukraine, we need to like work on these lines that we already discussed, that they must be a very essential part of this. So I think that this type of campaign, especially when it's in the frame within this broader framework that everyone is speaking about, like how we will rebuild Ukraine and who will be in charge of this and who will benefit from this and what will be the social labor and other guarantees for the ordinary people, including those who will be very essential for this process, like literally the construction workers who have to be at the heart of rebuilding infrastructure and rebuilding the apartments. So this is something that we need to address, and I think that it's quite important that you
I mean,
mentioned.
is clearly connected to rebuilding Ukraine. But in the United States, I think that it can be raised, that it should be raised very much in connection to the here and now.
Absolutely, because as I mentioned, it's not just about the post-war reconstruction; it's about the wartime reconstruction.
Yeah,
because the war economy
right, and
is run.
who's going to
Yes,
pay for this war?
yes. Who is paying for the war? So it should be like point one that you seize, expropriate the assets of Russian oligarchs, and then you have the Ukrainian oligarchs.
Right.
This is something that should be put forward as number one demand, and also they can claim that but we did everything, we did all the sanctions stuff and so on. But then you go after all these loopholes inside the systems that actually provide for the oligarchs to use them and to hide their actual like identities and who is in charge and who controls everything. So this needs, yes, to dismantle this general money laundering schemes in the US primarily. Yes, and this is something that should be a good antidote to all this trash that is talked by the likes of Tucker Carlson about how Ukrainians, this the most corrupt country in the world is Ukraine. But actually, we understand that, albeit Ukraine has big problems with corruption, and Eastern European countries also have others problems. But the root of the global corruption of the capitalist system is inside the United States, and
Right.
these are specifically the sponsors of Tucker Carlson and his friends.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yes.
And like I mentioned, which incidentally the left entirely neglects, but like I mentioned about Trump having been a money launderer for many years for the Russian oligarchs. And that kind of epitomizes what's happening in the US real estate industry, which is tied in with the banking and finance industry, which means the heart of capitalism itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just to wind up, it would be really useful. Would you be interested in doing an introduction in which you spoke about these issues in a meeting of the Ukraine Socialist Solidarity Campaign?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So with that, we'd like to thank Dennis very much for your time. And if you have any final words that you'd like to leave for socialists and for workers here in the United States.
My main words would be also words of solidarity, because like everywhere in the world, those on the socialist left in the US who really believe in the principles and the ideas of democratic socialism or revolutionary socialism or libertarian socialism, and who actually do it in practice. These are people who are involved in pretty everyday struggles in labor movement, in feminist movement, in environmentalist movement, and in many others that comprise this general anti-capitalist front of struggles. So here from Ukraine, we also want to thank for your solidarity and assure you of our support of those struggles that are waged by the working and oppressed people in the United States.